Very good. I think something happens, so it is recording. So welcome to the 115th Airhacks TV autumn. I would say summer is almost over, and it's like it is. Time flies. 115th editions or episode already, and I get a first question from the chat. Do you know if Crocus is going to add support for crack? I think it already has the support for crack because I'm using it as a snap start as Lambda. So the snap start is based on crack, at least it uses the same API, and I'm using this. So I didn't use crack outside of the cloud. So, but the snap start with Quarkus is working well, and Quarkus recently even add more support for that. So if you search for Quarkus and Snapstart, you will find the reference. But I don't know whether it supports crack directly outside the cloud. So this is I'm mostly using the Quarkus in public cloud in all projects actually right now. Great question, Chriso. Okay, then start with the show. And so money and currency. So what is my experience? I have to admit that I used just a long for it, and I calculated everything in cents, and it worked perfectly. And I did exactly what Grimly suggests, and then I used the number format to format money. But and in one project we had to calculate a lot, and the calculations were I would say not problematic, but they have to be, it has to be calculated the same way the finance department calculates that. And for this purpose, we used big decimal, and we spent a lot of time with the roundings. So having said that, what's available, I will try to find it in the tabs, is there is a JSR. I already found that. I think it is, there is a Yoda money. So what I found, so on the Yoda or Yoda money is actually interesting, but because it's actually the same author like Yoda Time and Stephen Colburn, and he is a perfectionist. So I would say nothing wrong with that. So this library, I would be confident to use it. So this is a good one. The license is okay, and I'm Stephen Colburn is just a great developer. So this is the first one. The other one is Java Money, and this is from Werner Keil now, and it implements the JSR 354. What is your JSR? JSR, I will just make it a little bit larger. A JSR is like the specification which is supposed to be implemented by various implementers. So Java money is also fine. So it is hard to tell. What I will do is I will just start with long and big decimal because I don't like dependencies first, regardless which. And if you say, okay, but there's a lot of work and I need something higher level, I will just write a short proof of concept and say, okay, I would like to try the I think it's called the Java money and with Yoda money, and the third one I forgot, but I opened it as well, and I took a look at the contributors on GitHub, and still all projects are active. So if we take a look at Java money, as you can see, lots of stuff happens. So this is the Werner, and this is the I know the guy actually. He wait a sec. Exactly, Anatole Trash, and as you can see, they are somehow is still on fire. This page, right, or on fire. It's still active. So now, if we take a look at the JSR, so similar story. I also took a look at that. Let's make it. And this is the Yoda money, and the Yoda money is this Yoda Stephen. This is Stephen Colburn, also the author of Yoda Time, which became the Java Date and Time. So really also a great API. So it is, I would say, less active, but it started earlier, right? So it started 13 years ago. So I would say in one point of time, the money is just done, right? So what you can do. Okay, so this And okay, this is still cranking the contributions. And this is the GSR, money and currency. What's actually the advantage of having the GSR is usually it is well documented, and you can read the documentation and you will immediately understand all the implementations. This was actually why I like, the Java E that much in Jakarta E, because I only had to look at the specification, and then I understood actually all implementations. Okay. So we have, I think we covered that. Now go back to here. So too much alternatives. Yeah, this is the problem with Java. So there is no search, unfortunately, because but I could actually implement something like this. But right now there's no search. Sorry. So and Grimly says, okay, don't use double, of course not. And for me, calculation with sense and long worked well. So now Grimly has 2 questions. So Grimly is a great, actually, great participant, because Grimly answers the question first and then asks new questions. So this is how it should be in airhacks. Okay, the chat is still somehow lazy today. Maybe I should rearrange that, because you see my hat. Wait a sec. Like that. Maybe it's better. So there's the authentication security context. It's ask me, okay, the security context or authentication is just objects. I would say not that in, wait a second, where is it? This is the event bridge, and I think this is the JSON Web Token, which I used the most these days, and I think it's called token. You can inject the JWT token. Let's see, injection of JSON Web Tokens. Okay, so, and you can this is how it looks in the source code. So this is not an object, it's a proper JSON Web Token. This is the caller principal. And there are methods to get the groups, the principal, and all these segments of the token. So exactly the claims, this is what I meant. The claims and the expirations and principles and whatever is embedded in the token. And of course, your custom scopes as well. And the principal or the UPN is usually mapped to Java E principal, and the groups are usually maps to roles. So this is the mapping. And the security context in Java E is injectable with at context and is also typed. So this is what I use, and actually I use it right now, because what happens in my current project is, or my in couple of projects, but in one project, what we do is that the Quarkus consumes the JSON Web Token issued from the application load balancer directly, and we can just use the JSON Web Token. What a Quarkus also can do is to implement OpenID Connect directly, but in the cloud, this is not the job of the runtime or application server to do that. In the cloud, the cloud should do this and just give us the token. This is usually enough. Or not usually, this is enough. So this specification is called microprofile JWT, and it's very usable. It's supported by all application servers, and I use it extensively. And I use in the cloud the Jakarta security far less. Even on premise. So on premise, I also it will be actually the job of the load balancer or API gateway to do the handshake with the backend and provide us the JSON Web Token. Handshake, I mean OpenID Connect flow with the authorization. Okay. Can you use, Chris asked me, can you use Auth2 claims with AWS Cognito? This is what I used for testing recently. So they are. I actually set up Cognito with ALB and ECS Fargate with Quarkus, and Quarkus understood the load balancer because we extended the extension. So the recent Quarkus supports is able to read application load balancer tokens. And with custom attributes, you can define scopes in Cognito, but you have to be careful because only specific scopes are OIDC standard scopes. Yeah. Okay. But I didn't. I would say with the scopes, I just add some scopes. I could read them. I didn't. The research was, my task was to make it work with application load balancer, and I could read, the claims or scopes, and I didn't test it with custom scopes. So this is the entire truth. Okay, now next one. I think we covered this. Oh no, this was the security context and authentication and object. So everything is typed. There was never object in Java actually, in Java E and microprofile. So there we have virtual threads, and the question is, will virtual threads help us with JPA? So I'm not. It really depends how JPA is implemented, because what happens usually, one transaction is one thread, but the transaction is not bound by JPA rather than by application server. So what happens is the threads are coming from outside. Every thread is a transaction, and there is one entity manager per transaction, and there's one cache per transaction. So I would say usually entity manager is actually not multi-threaded, right? So what we can get some help with is with the JDBC driver, because then we can parallelize stuff. So I would say, and also the JTA, Java Transaction API, is not really reactive. It is bound to the thread. So I would not expect an improvement in JPA. What I would expect is the overall improvement of scalability of the entire stack, because the application server could handle right now millions of transactions in parallel without any impact on memory usage. And the JPA will just also scale. The problem will be the database, because we will have to handle millions of transactions, which are actually, it's not really true, because we have connection pool, right? If we have connection pool, the transactions only needed if you do something with it. Otherwise, the application server can just put the transaction or the connection back to the pool. Frank asked me, Micronaut 4 security combined with MicroStream, is it possible? It should be. I never tried that, but MicroStream is just a nice visualizer. By the way, there was a really deep dive podcast with the CTO. This is Florian Habermann of MicroStream, about MicroStream. So let's say whether we will find that. It is airhacks FM, of course. So and then search for MicroStream. And this is why MicroStream is faster. We actually covered a lot of stuff about how MicroStream works behind the scenes and why it's so that fast, which is really fascinating. Why it's so fast is actually interesting. And because MicroStream are just POJOs, I would say it would work, but I never tried that. Okay. Yeah, and by the way, let's see. Oh, there's also an episode about OpenID Connect if you're a JSON Web Token, and this maybe is fascinating. I don't know whether you know about that, but I had actually the honor to have a chat with Ivar Jacobsen. And Ivar Jacobsen, or Ivar Jacobsen, is one of the three amigos of UML. And he invented boundary control entity. So I explained him how I use boundary control entity, entity control boundary or boundary control entity. And he was happy with it, which was actually very good, because I use it for 15 years right now and really happy. And it is a really nice guy, and he's over 80, which is great. I mean, you can still developing software if you are older, so no problem with it. So yeah, great episode, and Eva promised that we will have a follow-up conversation. So, but this one was nice. Okay, so podcast covered, and this was the virtual thread. So zero configuration. I'm not sure whether there is a zero configuration possible. There's also Prettier for Java, but what I think which has the momentum right now, I already opened it somewhere. It was not this one, rather than Oh, okay, we can also close. Oh, they were the contributions to, what was it? To the JSR reference implementation, which is also okay. So we already saw this. And the spotless. So, and it is not exactly zero configuration, but it looks like that. And lots of the configuration is optional. For instance, you can say, I don't like, to have an relation to Git. And you can say, I would like to just remove the includes, for instance. And you can say trim trailing white space, end with new line, and so forth. And then you can say Google Java format or whatever you have. There's like a profile. And you can even add license headers. And then it is working. And I would say, this is the nicest one right now. And you can do Maven spotless apply. It just reformats the code. And if you say spotless, not apply, check, I think, then you get error if the source code is not compliant. So I would say, right now, I would pick spotless. Okay, so covered. Okay, next one is from Mr. Vano from Georgia or Georgia, right? It could be both. And Mr. Grimley is Michael Turpin. So, and he asked, I watched your session about Fed Lambdas. And I said, okay, as I understood, you can run entire Quarkus micros as one Lambda. This is what I'm doing actually in most cases. And this one Quarkus Lambda runs as a snap start, which is somehow compatible to crack, and this Quarkus ships with sometimes several hundred endpoints, no problem, or methods. So I'm using, it's not better to use DynamoDB. For me as JPA fanboy, DynamoDB is a bit ugly, but I don't have, to care about the database. I don't have to care about backups, clustering, nothing. It just works. It is crazy fast, but a bit uglier than Postgres with JPA. So that's just the truth. So if everything would be free and fast, and I wouldn't care about databases, I would just recommend to use Postgres with JPA. If I am in charge of if for fiddling with the database, I will go for Dynamo or Cosmos DB for sure. So how we can replace connection pooling Quarkus application with RDS proxy or something else? So usually what you can do with Lambda, or what I'm doing with Lambda is I configure the connection pool to only have one single connection. This is how it works. You have 100 Lambdas, 100 connections. If this is not enough, you can install RDS proxy. And what the RDS proxy is like a middleware. And the RDS proxy dispatches the connections. So it is like or not dispatches, it's like a multiplex, right? So you can have 100 virtual connections mapped to a viewer physical connections, okay? So this is what, yeah, and I actually opened the RDS proxy. So RDS proxy is a product. You have to configure that and deploy this. And as additional feature, you get also encryption. Okay. Oh, Ike, the friend of the show, asked me, if a Lambda is deployment runtime, the JDBC connection pool has no meaning. What strategy would you use instead so you not need to create connection on each Lambda creation? You could use Quarkus with snapstart, and there is a hook. I forgot the name, but the hook is documented. And in the hook, you can actually open the connection. So this could work. It depends on the driver, but you could try this. With database, it really depends on the driver. It is a physical connection. It won't work. It is a logical connection. It could work. With DynamoDB, it works because there's actually no connection. This is just a client which talks, this is the problem with relational databases, by the way. If you have a relational database, the connection is a socket, more or less, right? So you cannot just serialize it. But if you have a cloud-native database like DynamoDB, there's no physical connection. It's just like you only need an HTTP. The database is available via an HTTP API. So if you call the database, you're actually initiating HTTP calls. Yeah, but I would say, you know, the opening a JDBC connection these days has to be fast enough. I think there are no more problems with the performance as it was before. Ike, thank you for the question. So we covered RDS, but if you have problem with latency, RDS could also help you. But RDS, of course, is a little bit more expensive because it is an additional service, right? Okay, so now what is the next one? Jakarta, Tiago is a friend of the show. Ask me, what do you think about Jakarta data specification? How can we use it with BCE? So what is Jakarta data? So Jakarta data is similar to Panache. And if we take a look, and let's search for, this is, by the way, the specification, right? Repository. So there will be somewhere, hopefully, a source code, an example. Let's see. Oh, what's that? So search for inject, always good. Oh, sorry. It's a new Firefox. Inject. Yeah, this is how it looks like. This is repository, car repository, X and Squad repository. This is very similar to actually to Panache. And so let's search. Yeah, and this is how it look like. You will get ID 10. This is car of ID with ID 10, name Ferrari, type sport, repository, save, and you have it. So this is like a builder pattern and save it. So, and so what about boundary control entity? I will put the repository in control package and entity in entity package. This is what I would do. The question is, what is my opinion on Jakarta data? I mean, it looks a bit nicer. This is the same opinion like Panache versus JPA. But what I do, I actually also perform a lots of code reviews. And what I notice is, in one point of time, you know, you have to think hard about the queries. You spend the most of time queries. So syntactic sugar is really nice at the beginning of the project. Later, it doesn't matter really, because you will have huge joints, or, you know, you have to spend time profiling. So it's more like nice to have thing, but it's important, you know, to show some innovation. And I would say I would use Jakarta data before I use Panache, because Panache is Quarkus invention. Jakarta data, there is a more possibilities that will be implemented by Micronaut, maybe, you know, Helidon for sure. It will be implemented, Glassfish and Whitefly. So I'm not depending on one single implementation. So this would be the advantage of, or there is advantage of Jakarta data. So I like the spec. For me right now is not that usable because I have to work in the clouds because clients demand it right now. And I'm using almost everywhere S3 or DynamoDB. So I'm not using relational databases a lot. So yeah, it looks like Delta Spike, Pascal says, is based on, I guess so, because, you know, this is the people, they have long, you know, Jakarta and microprofile tradition. So this is inspired by Delta Spike, and maybe even inspired by Spring Data, which was created by Graham Roche, who is actually now the main contributor to Micronaut. Okay, so next one. So what do you think about using database IDs on the REST API? So and what about business keys or composite keys in REST API? You can absolutely use composite keys in the REST API because the path param can have templates. So you can say, you know, like partition key and sort key even. So you could absolutely expose the database. So this is technically is not a problem. From the business perspective, I would say, I mean, let's imagine you have a business key and the business key is the invoice number. So it was actually a beautiful thing if you expose the invoice number via REST, because then you can, with the invoice number, you get the invoice, right? So so I have nothing against business keys, But I would say this is like, you cannot win this battle. I was in a company, there were DB2 administrators and Oracle gurus, and there was I don't know, for years there was a debate which is better. So the Oracle preferred, the technical IDs, and the DB2 people preferred the business keys, and there was discussion, endless discussion without a result. So I don't think we can solve that here at airhacks.tv. Okay. So this one is interesting because you mentioned here ULID, and this is what I use a lot because what I'm using is we are using UID for DynamoDB, let's say. I'm using this in DynamoDB. And with the ULID, it is lexicographically or lexically. It is sortable. This is a UID, which is sortable. And I also open this pack. And I only would like to, this is this. And is lexicographically sortable. And Alex Nerd says, "Hi everyone. Hey Alex, you are late, right? I mean, what's up?" So half hour later, as usual is. But yeah, it is lexicographically sortable. So this is UID, which is helpful because you get keys back and you can sort them, and you have like a time series database. So I don't see any downsides. If I use UID, I will always use ULIDs if I can, right? A downside is, of course, it is not directly supported by Java SE, so you will have to do something, you have to add dependency, whatever. It was half serious, Alex. So, and it's not serious at all, actually. So, Alex, then you have to at least ask a question. Then, you are excused. This is, who comes late will have to ask one question. So this is the deal here. So Krizo, a very good question. When to use DocumentDB, DynamoDB, and Aurora v2 or Aurora v1? So Aurora v1 is not dead yet. So DocumentDB is MongoDB, but less powerful. So DocumentDB is like Aurora v2. So Aurora v2 is Postgres or MySQL, extended by AWS. And DocumentDB is MongoDB with less features versus DynamoDB. So I would, of course, use DynamoDB without any question. Why? Because DynamoDB is tier 0 service, means all other, or not all others. A lot of services depend on DynamoDB at AWS, but I don't think a lot of services depend on DocumentDB or Aurora v2. So I would say DynamoDB has to be rock solid. Then this DynamoDB, there were papers about DynamoDB papers from Amazon, 10 years ago. And on the papers, lots of databases are based. Like, for instance, Cassandra was inspired by DynamoDB paper. I think React back then. And I would say the DynamoDB is like the cloud-native database at Amazon, like Google Spanner is, the thing at Google. So I would prefer DynamoDB. So Aurora v2 and Aurora v1, they are great choices if you have to use relational database. So what Aurora v2 is, it is a cloud-native relational database. So what does mean for me cloud-native? For me, a cloud-native database means for me is that the persistent storage and the compute engine are separate. So they are like two tiers. And in the case of Aurora v2, the persistence is clustered by AWS, and the engine is decoupled, and this is basically Postgres or MySQL. And Aurora v2, it scales up and down fast, but it cannot scale to 0. So you have to spend half ACU, Aurora capacity unit, which will cost you roughly 40 euros a month or something like this. And V1 can scale to 0, but the problem is if you will have scale up with V1, it take a few minutes. Yeah, what is the criteria? What is the criteria between Aurora v2 and DynamoDB? My criteria is who has to set up the database and who cares about the database. If I'm in charge of the database, I pick DynamoDB. because in 1 second after table, the entire security is done and I can start working. But if I have to pick Aurora v2, I have to provision an VPC, subnets, install the Aurora there. I have to think about backups. I have to think about clustering, backup encryption, users, and if I set up the database, it's still empty. And if I create tables, the question is now who is the user of the tables. So I have to specify a specific principles. I would say with MongoDB, with DynamoDB, I'm just done. So there's nothing to do. I just say give me the table, I'm done, and I can actually provision the table even with CDK. So yeah, these are the criteria. Okay. Now, Krizu, you're on fire, so I have to send you a T-shirt. Or if you and Alex, you have to ask question. What's wrong? You know, you came late and no questions. So when SQS, SNS, and Kinesis. So very easy to answer. SQS is a queue, SNS is a topic, and Kinesis is more or less like Kafka. So it means if you have, like a payment provider and you would like to have repeat something, to deliver. So SQS and SNS comprise JMS, I would say, right? So if you have JMS, you have both. So SQS sends a message to a provider and it fails, it repeats this automatically. SNS is a broadcast, is end-to-end, and Kinesis is like a Kafka without Kafka, right? So, but very, very similar. So I need to notify a client application about data changes and have different clients that are not allowed to see each other notification. Would Event Bridge also? So Event Bridge is great, but Event Bridge, I think I opened that. So this is the Event Bridge, but Event Bridge, we cannot really read it, right? So, but Event Bridge is more like really very pragmatic ESB. I don't think you can notify clients, but what you can do is you can send messages between Lambdas, and Lambdas can notify clients. So I will look at Event Bridge, but Event Bridge is a little bit different because the payload of Event Bridge is JSON, and I think is limited to 50K. But Event Bridge is crazy fast, it is cheap, it is serverless, and usually you would like to use Event Bridge to receive events from various AWS services. So this is how I will use Event Bridge, but I don't think it's technically even possible to send via Event Bridge messages to client outside of the cloud, right? So usually what I'm doing is Event Bridge, no code. So for instance, you can listen to S3 and you can pass the event and run code pipeline or code build or on every change notify a Lambda. Okay, so and Mr. Bojan B, is it possible to use S3 bucket as a source from code build? Source from code build, which has a VPC access. By default, code build was working perfectly in S3. When I add code build to a VPC, a connection to S3 stopped working. I added a net gateway. Yeah, net gateway is ugly because what you did is you exposed. So now your code build goes via internet and goes to S3, and which is expensive. So can I avoid net somehow? Yes, you can install so-called S3 endpoint in the VPC. It is free, and then your code build will talk in the cloud directly with code. Wait a second. The code build in the VPC will talk directly to S3, which is cheaper, faster, and more secure. And please delete the NAT gateway then. So Ike asked me, with Terraform no longer open source, is enterprise, would you prefer Pulumi or just go with CDK, of course? So I do everything with CDK. So why? Because CDK ships with, this is the AWS technology, and if I go to AWS Cloud, I use AWS CDK. I would just use CDK. But Pulumi is really great, and Terraform reminds me on XML with VI. This is my experiences with Terraform. Okay, so what we skipped were actually the 100 episodes back. So we had 20 years of Java. It was When was it? 2015. This was 10 years ago. Huh? No, 10 years ago. 8 years ago. So we have Java's 28 years old already. Can it be? So 20 years of Java. So this is the questions 100 episodes ago or 8 years ago. So moving a process from E server to a microservice, I would say right now it is more appealing. Maybe after 8 years, everyone noticed the microservices was not always a good idea. So we should merge them together maybe. So EJB visibility on private, I would say it didn't matter back then because what got injected were proxies, so no one cared about the fields. Do you agree that concept of EJB pool is dead end? Not at all, because it is still usable right now. For instance, what I did recently is I used GraalVM JavaScript runtime in an object, and with EJB pool I could just say give me 5, and I have hot environment. So actually, EJB bean pool is almost identical to the concept of warm or hot lambdas, right? So EJBs really behave like a lambda. So I would say they came maybe a little bit too early. But yeah, I mean AWS Lambda. How do you test with Archillion? So I never use Archillion. So what I do, I use system tests and black box still. Why you should use WebSockets, actually I will have to use them soon, is to proactively notify clients. I would say WebSockets are getting more and more popular. So Ike asked me, what's my opinion on Code Whisperer? Code Whisperer works perfectly, especially with CDK. And what Code Whisperer is very similar to Copilot. So yeah, and you can use it for free, or you can buy enterprise. You can buy it as a product. So but it works well, Ike. So it is well integrated with Visual Studio Code as well. So GSF, yeah, GSF less appealing, I would say right now, but they are still working. And what I still, if I would find a little bit time, what I wanted to do actually is to make Jaspar, which is the GSP compiler, work outside of servlets and use it as a templating engine, actually. This would be interesting task. So this MVC and Spring MVC, I think we can skip that because it's less appealing. And Afterburner was actually an interesting technology, or it still is. It was the Afterburner. I implemented dependency injection for Java Vixen, and I get still feedback that is used a lot. So this was the time traveling. And by the way, you asked me about the JSON Web Tokens. Actually, the example I will also show at the workshops in winter. There's still a few seats available. Actually, this I thought no one will come this time, but there are lots of interest. So there will be. Right now we have there are more than enough registrations already. Maybe we'll close it. So if you like to attend, register. So in the first workshop, what I will do, I will talk about Cognito, application load balancer, HTTP API gateways, Lambda, authorizers, and the security, IAM, and whatever encryption, whatever has to do with security. And the second one is the most common questions, like for instance, how many Lambdas are in a Maven project, or the questions, should we use DynamoDB or Postgres as a recurring question, right? Or yeah, this is what we will do in the second part. Is just the recurring questions and patterns, and how to structure projects, how to structure Lambdas, should Lambdas be synchronous or asynchronous, and so forth. Okay. Oh, Alex Netter has a question for classical Java, so please ask if you have. Are you already using Digma? No, that it's released. Not yet, but Digma is an interesting product, and I'd actually... there are too many products. Just the time is the problem, really. If you're interested in Digma, search for Digma with Ronnie Dover. And this is continuous observability. and with bug-driven development. So take a look at Digma, a really nice company. And the cool story is they had the idea to have like continuous observability tool, and they wanted to support several languages, but they started with Java because they say we have the best community ever. So this is the reason. So I think we are done. So see you at airhacks FM, and of course, you know my airhacks industries website, which is a collection of all links. And yeah, and if you like, take a look at the shorts, Java shorts, lots of fun. So thank you a lot. See you in October. Bye.